as we're trying to do is we're trying to really create a broad base of practitioners that you, the viewer, can really relate to a lot of different perspectives. And today, fortunate to have Chris Hecht with us. He is a PE teacher and an athletics coach at Grayland Country Day School. Chris works with the primary education, and he's really doing some cool things to instill some concepts that we feel near and dear in the performance world when we look at like the LTAD model and we look at specific areas of development for these athletes. Chris is really doing his best to implement that in his school. So thank you for joining us today. Why don't you give our viewers maybe just a little bit more a little more in depth of what it is that you do on a day-to-day with your job?
Well, the main thing for me is, being a PE teacher, I teach kindergarten through 8th grade. And I have a very unique situation. I have 18 kids. I see them every single day. So it gives me a perfect opportunity to work with the kids on a daily basis. A lot of other schools, they'll have every other week or maybe twice a week or 3 times every 2 weeks. So the frequency, I think, is very important. And then what I will do in my class, for a 30-minute class, for example, what I will do is I will spend about the first third of that just working on sport generic concepts, just trying to work on form running, a little bit of strengthening, a little bit of flexibility, a little bit of reaction, maybe metabolic conditioning, just a little bit of here and there before I finally break into a sport skill of some kind or a movement pattern or whatever our unit is for that week.
Okay. Well, that's really cool. So did you say K through 8th grade?
Yes.
Okay, so K through 8th grade. So you get to see them truly change. If they stay in your school from K to 8th grade, you're seeing those sensitive stages from the fundamentals, the learn to train, train to train. You're really starting to see that.
Right.
And are you trying to change your curriculum, or how is the school itself? Have they adopted an LTAD type model?
We're still in the process. It's kind of slow going.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how else to say that. I was a big proponent of it. The backstory on it was about 5 years ago, I went to a clinic in Chicago and I first heard about long-term athlete development. And the presenter was just talking about all the stuff not to do, and I'm like, oh, that's exactly what I do. So it was a really bitter pill for me to swallow. Mm-hmm. But I could also understand the concept, the development of how to make an athlete better, not just for a snapshot in time or a flash in time, but for the whole long term. And I started to kind of adjust and adapt some of my curriculum based on some of these things. And I started to read more, research more about long-term athletic development, started to share that with my peers and my colleagues, and they're starting to get some buy-in on it. But I think because there's not a real concrete model to go by that a school could go by,
right.
That it leaves a lot for interpretation. And for me, it's been a lot of trial and error to get where I am now, but I think I'm in a good spot where I can influence some of the things that we do teach on a developmental basis. And the flow, the progression, how to regress if you need to, how to progress when it's necessary, I think is huge.
It's funny because we see a lot of athletes in here from really the middle school age. And one of the first things we'll do through our screening process is we'll ask them to skip. And we just want to see what their core coordination looks like. And it's absolutely mind-blowing to me how many kids do not know how to skip. Yeah. And I know growing up for me, I'm sure if somebody asked me to skip and I was a little bit apprehensive, scared, nervous, maybe I wouldn't have been able to do it either. However, it seems like it's not just this inhibition, it's this inability to do.
Right.
Is that part of their curriculum? Do you throw in the skipping, the kicking, the throwing, and all those rudimentary drills in early?
I do, and that's one thing that we practice every day with the form running, the skipping, galloping, shuffle slide, karaoke, anything that's going to be just basic footwork for these kids. And it's not just front movements or moving forward, it's backwards, it's side to side. I mean, you have to get all directions and all different planes, because I have some kids, they'll do great job skipping forwards. Ask them to skip backwards, they end up right on their butt.
Yeah, and I bet they always say to you, but coach, when am I ever going to do this? When am I going to ever do this? And one thing I always tell my athletes as well, it's not that you may ever do this, however, being more coordinated never hurts, or being a better athlete never hurts.
Absolutely, absolutely. And just trying to get them to move side to side, I mean, they're just they just want to go forward fast, and that seems to be the main thing. So, it's like, you know what, let's stop, let's back it up a little bit, let's work on forward, backward, side to side, let's go to a higher level skipping, and so like what we would call a power skip versus a low level, speed skip, where you just really turn those feet over.
Nice.
I mean, just trying to incorporate, all 3 planes in a 3-dimensional movement pattern, I think is huge.
30-minute class?
30 minutes.
30 minutes class. I find that with our younger athletes as well. If it goes much longer than that, you lose a lot of the focus and the attention that maybe you had. It's almost like that perfect window to cap it off. I like that. Yeah. So talk to us a little bit about how long have you been doing this?
I've been a PE teacher for, I think this is my 16th year at Greenland. I've been coaching athletics for, 23 years now, I think, and I've coached football, baseball, wrestling, track,
wow.
Softball, I guess you could throw that in there, basketball, lacrosse. Then, I've just now started to get into the weightlifting aspect of it as well. Not necessarily like a team competition or anything like that, but just, trying to incorporate some weightlifting with some of my 6th, 7th, and 8th grade students as well. Nice.
And teaching those core fundamentals on the Olympic lifting process. Fantastic. So you've been doing this for quite a while, and if say we have some viewers out there who are looking to go this phys ed route, what would you say for you, some of your early mistakes you made as a practitioner that really jumped out at you that would help maybe somebody younger who's going this direction?
The main mistakes I made was assuming that the kids knew how to do some of this stuff, and they don't. The kids they're basically just a lump of clay, and my job, I see it, is to start shaping them and developing them, so that by the time they get to middle school or even to a secondary school, they have some of those rudimentary patterns and scaffolding in place that they can build on. So my ultimate goal is to get them, one, to enjoy an active lifestyle for the rest of their life. Second, to enjoy a long, healthy athletic career. And the third one is to get them to, help maximize their potential.
Right.
And they have to understand it doesn't come easy. That it takes a lot of work and a lot of concentration, a lot of focus. But to come back to your question about some of the challenges was, thinking that the kids knew how to skip, they knew how to jump, they knew how to run. And the bottom line is they don't. They might have a vague idea on how to do it, but I really think it's responsible as an educator of these kids to teach them the correct movement patterns. I think there's a concept, I'm sure there's a fancy name for it. I call it negative learning, where you set the kids out there and you watch them and they'll keep doing it without reinforcement. If they continue to do it the wrong way, they're going to continue to groove that pattern the wrong way.
Right.
And so now it's harder to break that cycle. So you almost have to be on them, coaching them the whole way through, providing positive feedback, providing guidance, the cueing, the prompting, everything. I mean, it's almost like you have to do it about every 5 seconds.
Well, and I can see as a young practitioner, being thrown into a job like that where maybe you're not aware of how sensitive motor learning is, and that you do need to stay on top of those things to actually correct some of those faulty or bad patterns, or just unaware patterns. Let's call it unaware patterns, because they just don't know any different.
Good word. Yeah.
So as a young coach, you have to stay on top of it. But however, you also have to know what is right to be able to correct what is wrong. And that's where I think somewhere in the movement curriculum that is lost, of what truly is right, from what in your mind is efficient mechanics versus what is truly ideal and optimal.
Yeah, I agree with that completely. There is a disconnect, and the whole phrase in education is catch them when they're doing something right, and that is the most powerful thing that you can do, because now that light bulb goes off, they have that aha moment, and then they say, "Ooh, I'm going to get praised for that." And it's not necessarily, some of it's extrinsic, sure, but some of it is also that intrinsic motivation. It's like, okay, well, coach saw me doing this, and he got really excited, so I want to do that again, so I can, it kind of gets that intrinsic motivation, not necessarily the extrinsic as well.
Absolutely. A lot of those kids, when they get that praise from you, it hits them right here.
Yep.
And, it puts them in that position where, they're not necessarily teacher's pet. However, it's really nice when your teacher calls you out in front of your peers and said, man, great job on that.
Yeah, it's a validation, it's acknowledgement, it's that, that sense of pride, that inner pride that comes out, and they just start beaming after that. It's really cool to see.
Right. Can you talk to us specifically about, you know, in your course of teaching, some situations where maybe you saw an athlete who initiated into your program and, you know, wasn't the most athletic, wasn't this, however, they put the hard work into it, and next thing you know, they're excelling in this sport or that sport, or even with their grades. Maybe their grades were really faulty or poor, and they got more confidence through the curriculum that you give, and next thing you know, you see it steamroll into their grades.
I have a couple examples, actually. Awesome. I have a, just at the beginning of last month, I had out of nowhere, I got an email from a student who moved. He left my school in 5th grade, and now he's a freshman out in San Francisco. I got an email from him out of the blue, thanking me for the work that I did. I did a speed, an SAQ clinic with him, not necessarily as good as yours, but he's told me, he said he qualified as a freshman. He qualified for state and cross country 4 years later after the fact. And I have a feeling it was because his coach that he was working with at the time, you know, I'd like to take all the credit for it, but I can't. But I have a feeling it was some of the things that his coach was doing with him, like in practices and throughout those 4 years away from Grayling. But he still reminded him of you know, some of the techniques and things that I taught him. So I think it's kind of, you know, some of this stuff can be kind of universal. I mean, you talked about having that disconnect, but there are a lot of similarities as well too. I mean people that come to your clinics and all these other conferences and everything, I mean, there's going to be a universal, there should be a universal language right. on how to coach and how to teach. The second example also happened early last month. A parent of a 5th grade student of mine came up to me and she said, you know, my daughter finally, she really enjoys my class, she really enjoys learning from me, and she finally said something the other day. She said, Mom, I don't want to be the social and the most popular girl. I want to be a strong girl. And you know, when you look at it for a 5th grade girl, and that's an age, I mean, that's a whole other topic, but with the gender differences. But 4th, 5th, and 6th grade seems to be at an age where we do lose a lot of the girls. But to have that girl make that statement, I think was huge validation for me.
Absolutely. Now, remind me, how many days a week are they in your program?
5 days a week. We usually do 4 days of you know, unit work. So we'll have like a, you know, it depends on the grade level. If it's 1st, 2nd, 3rd, we do like a fundamental movement skill or a fundamental sport skill or something like that. When we get into 4th and 5th grade, we start moving into a more tactical approach, lead-up games and things like that. So
for 5 days a week, that's pretty unheard of, I have to believe, at the primary education.
It's truly unique.
Yeah. So you have them 5 days a week. Now, you mentioned the peer component. Is there a component of that where they just want to give the most minimal effort possible because they don't want to try too hard in front of their peers? Do you run into that, or have you created a nice little friendly, competitive environment? Obviously, we want fun. However, one thing I've noticed in a lot of the athletes I've worked with lately, the drive to compete in something. You know, you don't necessarily have to win, but try.
Yeah.
How is that at 5 days a week? Do you see that help or hurt that?
Both. I like to think that I put in a friendly competition or create that environment where the kids feel safe. They feel like they can try to do things to do better. I'm always going to have the kids that want to compete with somebody else in the class, and at the sacrifice of technique, at the sacrifice of intensity. But there are those other kids who kind of offset that. They are the other end of that spectrum. They are the hard workers. They are the diligent ones. They are the ones that challenge themselves and push themselves. So it's kind of that, you know, the bell-shaped curve. You're always going to have some over here, you're always going to have some over here, and most of them are going to fall in the middle.
Okay.
As far as, you know, as what the competition is like, or the fun aspect of it, I think fun exists between effort and challenge. If it's either one of those is too easy or too hard, it's not going to be fun.
Right.
I also believe, though, that you can't just have fun the whole time. Because, you know, I use the example of, it's like the core or the classroom teacher just, you know, has them watch a movie.
Right.
Is it great for the kids? Is it informative? Is it entertaining for them? Yes, it is, but that's not necessarily teaching. So what the kids want and what the kids need, there's a lot of overlap. They're not exactly the same thing. Right. So I think there's got to be that separation as well.
So, okay, if you have these athletes K through 8, essentially what you're doing is you're really setting them up for people like me.
Right.
You're setting them up for people like me. You're giving them to me on a silver platter, saying, okay, we've set them up well coordinatively. They've got a great foundation. Do your thing. Talk to me a little bit about some of the athletes who have gone on to do exceptional things that you remember when they were a kindergartner. I'm sure you follow your athletes, no doubt.
Actually, it's harder because they all, once they leave Grayland, they go on to other schools, and it's really hard to keep track to see what they do. A lot of times, they just write about what an influence I was. Probably the best compliment that I can ever get is when these kids go on to their high school, and they always come back to visit, and they say, "Coach, you were right. I should have listened to you more." But as far as what they've done outside of that, I really don't know. I mean, some of these kids, they blossom, but I don't see the end result of it. That's probably the one downside of stopping in eighth grade, is that I don't see what happens on the other end of it.
Well, I can tell you, I've had 3 females, all sisters, that went through Grayland, and all 3 of them went on to win state in tennis, become field hockey All-Americans. All 3 of them went on to college sports, 2 in tennis, 1 in field hockey. So I know you're doing some really
triplets?
good. No.
Okay.
3 different ages. I'll tell you afterwards.
Okay, fair enough.
But fantastic athletes, and they came in to me with a good rudimentary skill set. They really did, because when I get my athletes in, and I started training all of them too when they were young. It's still at Grayland, actually, but it's the same thing. We want to saturate them with all those movement qualities and just get them moving, have some fun, and express that athleticism. That sometimes we make things too strict, too rigid, and we lose the athletic ability of it. And again, to our fault that we do a lot in our country is we put the sport before the skills. And we're playing how many t-ball games, but we can't even hold the bat.
Right.
There's just so many flaws in how we typically do things, that it's nice to see what it is that you're doing with your athletes at the school. So I'm going to ask you one last question, and think about it for a second. But good books. Anything good book related to the field, unrelated to the field, that you think would help a practitioner such as myself or anybody who's watching?
Oh gosh, I think anybody, Istvan Bali, he's kind of one of the lead proponents for the long-term athlete development, and he actually did publish a book about long-term athlete development, and it's actually very well written. How to work with, how to develop the athlete, not just from my standpoint as a coach, but if that athlete is also doing a club team as well. How do you work with that coach as well, so that you're not getting the athlete burning the candle at both ends or burning themselves out. The Aspen Institute, I think, did a fantastic little leaflet, and I wish I could remember the name of it, or not necessarily a leaflet, but it's about a 20-page guide on the new playbook for developing kids. So I think it's like $10 at the Aspen Institute, and I get nothing from them. Nothing from them. But Rick Howard actually turned me on to that one, and it's like, wow, this is really good. It takes the whole performance pyramid, turns it on its side. So again, trying to get the kids active. So what if they don't choose to do competitive sport? What if they choose to do an individual sport? What if they just choose to do intramurals or some type of activity? That's fine. I don't want a kid who goes to a birthday party, and because they have a volleyball net set up in the backyard, no, I can't do that because I'm not good at that. No, I want them to feel, yeah, I did this in PE class. I learned how to do this. So, the whole competitiveness aside and the whole athletic side of it is like, what? Get out there and play too. Stay active, because that, I still see the shelf life of an athlete is about 8 to 12 years, and if we can do anything to expand that, they're going to be, it's their health for the rest of their life too, and I think that would carry over.
You're still on the hook here. I told you that was the last question, but I have another one. When I was in elementary school, I remember what I looked forward to most was intramurals. And you just touched on it, but intramurals, I was like, I cannot wait for after school, because we're playing pin guard today, and my gym teacher, when I was in elementary school, Mr. Buffo, I still remember him. He still had a huge impact on me. But I remember, he would set up these games for us. 45 minutes, after school, we would be playing these games, and it was awesome. Competition. But I remember you would look forward to these games. Do you guys implement a lot of intramurals after school, or how does it work?
In our 5-day week, it's usually our Friday, we have our game day Friday, and that's when we just let all the kids in that grade, and we just come up with some big activity for the kids to do, and they just, you know, not necessarily turn them loose, but it is controlled chaos.
Yeah.
I mean, so whether it's a capture the flag type of game, or just some kind of dodging or throwing, or you know, friendly competition type of thing as well. After school, this is where, you know, we actually put together a task force on how to get phys ed into our daily curriculum for our 7th and 8th graders, because they will do sports after school. And so there really isn't a lot of intramural yet. Okay. I have a feeling, though, that with this task force proposal that we just put together for our school, it actually might start incorporating some of those. We're piloting some things. Like I did a sports conditioning clinic after school. I had about 25 kids show up for that, which was the biggest I've ever had. I have another colleague who's doing a lifetime sports, so they'll do like bowling, they'll do ultimate frisbee, they'll do golf, they'll do all kinds of other activities with these kids after school. So I really think we're trying to evolve into something else other than just the traditional sports model. And awesome. I think it is really awesome. I'm pretty excited about it. Well,
good for you, and I just want to, you know, thank you for stopping by today, but also thank you for doing what it is that you do to allow me to get these athletes who are already, you know, set with a solid foundation. So thank you very much.
Oh, thank you for having me. I appreciate the opportunity, and you know, I do need help, so I can't just do it alone. I mean, we have the thing with that Aspen Institute. One of the things we're saying is that we're actually seeing a decrease in kids participating in organized sport. And if there's anything that we can do, you know, whether it is just drop out for interest or anything else, if there's anything that we can do to keep these kids active for their lifetime, I think it's going to be huge.
Absolutely.
So,
absolutely.